Chapter 15. Paul! He grinned at her, a hard, cold grin. Not friendly, not amused. His hand tightened on her shoulder. Paul, why? You missed me, huh? What? What do you mean? I heard you calling me back there. Let go, Paul, you're hurting me. He eased his grip but didn't release her. I thought I saw you following me, so I called you. Let go of me. He slowly let go. He was standing close to her, too close. He pressed his face close to her cheek. She could feel his breath, hot against her skin. Feel his breath. Did a ghost breathe? Frightened, she took a step back, but he moved forward, staying with her. Why'd you run away last night? He asked, his dark, cold eyes staring into hers. You and me could have a good thing going. You were so awful, she said, and those disgusting friends of yours. Hey, they're my buddies. He seemed amused by her reaction to them. They're good guys. What do you want, Paul? She took another step back and realized she had backed into the trunk of a big Oldsmobile. He moved forward, blocking her escape. If he took one more step, she'd be pinned against the trunk. What do I want? He laughed. What does any red-blooded American boy want from a nice-looking girl? Get away from me. Let me go. Why are you acting like this? He looked hurt. Hey, listen, you came on to me last night. I did not. Looked that way to me. I don't understand. Why are you acting like such a creep? I've been trying to help you. Huh? Like I promised. Huh? He looked confused. He scratched the side of his face, then unbuttoned his denim jacket, revealing a blue sleeveless t-shirt underneath. You want to help me? He gave her a dirty grin. She shoved him and pulled away from the trunk, running hard between cars to get to her car on the street. Hey, he called, trotting after her. Don't run away again. I thought you wanted to help me. Just go away, she shouted. Now you're hurting my feelings, he called, several yards behind her. I don't like that. I don't like it when rich, snobby girls hurt my feelings. He's crazy, she thought. I've got to get away from him. She reached her car, pulled the door handle. It didn't budge. She forgot she had locked it. She plunged her hand into her bag and began frantically rummaging around for her keys. But now he had caught up to her, smiling triumphantly. He grabbed her bag and held it out of her reach. Give it back, she demanded, reaching for it and missing. He backed up, laughing, still holding her bag high above his head. Give it back, Paul. He laughed again. Come and get it. Paul! She grabbed for it, but he twirled away, keeping it out of her reach. Give it back, now. You're not funny. He didn't give back the bag, and his smile faded. You're not going to give me a chance, are you? He said. What? You heard me. I don't know what you're talking about. Just give me back my bag. I'm not a bad guy, really, but you'd never want to find that out. Paul, you're talking crazy. Please give me back my bag. I've got to go. She made another wild grab for the bag. He pulled it out of her reach and drew it under his arm. I can play rough, he said, his dark eyes wild as they stared into hers. I can play real rough if I have to. Paul, come on, she cried. How did you know my name? He demanded. What? You told it to me. I never did. Come on, tell me. Where'd you learn my name? Paul, don't be ridiculous. She saw the police car before he did. The black and white car, cruising slowly, pulled up beside her car. The officer on the passenger side poked his head out the window. Problem here? No problem, Melissa answered quickly, as Paul handed her back her bag. She expected him to disappear into thin air, but he stood there, frozen on the spot, staring at the policeman, a funny-looking smile on his face. Well, I think there is a problem, the policeman said. He turned and said something to his partner behind the wheel. Then he opened the door and, eyeing Melissa and Paul, slowly stepped out of the police car. This your car? He asked Melissa. She nodded, glancing at Paul, who was standing with his hands behind his back, looking very pale and worried. Well, it's in a no-parking zone. He pointed to a tall sign several yards away. You're supposed to park inside the lot, not outside. What's your name? Can I see your driver's license? Melissa Dryden, she said, searching in her bag for her wallet. I didn't see the sign. I didn't realize. She pulled out her driver's license and handed it to him. He started to examine it when his partner leaned out of the car and shouted, Forget it, Ernie. We've got an emergency. Let's roll. The blaring siren starting up made Melissa jump. Sorry, miss. The policeman tossed the license to her and jumped back into his car. She watched them roar off. Hey, listen, Paul said, smiling and acting very relieved. You got a break there, huh? I'd never get a break like that, that's for sure. Bye, she said, unlocking the car and sliding behind the wheel. Whoa, wait, Melissa. I'm sorry I gave you a hard time, he said, looking contrite. I was just having a little fun. I didn't mean... She slammed the car door and missed the rest of what he had to say. The car started right up, and a few seconds later she pulled away, leaving him on the curb, staring after her, an unhappy expression on his face. She watched him in the rearview mirror, expecting him to disappear into thin air, but he didn't move. I've got to get rid of him, she thought, speeding through a yellow light, then making a sharp left turn. He's following me everywhere. He's taking over my life, and he wants to hurt me. A few minutes later, she parked the car in the drive, ran into the house, shouted hello to Marta, who was vacuuming the living room, and ran up to her room. No, she shouted. Paul, sitting on her bed, stood up quickly. No, leave me alone. Stop following me. Just leave me alone. Ignoring her pleas, he moved toward her quickly, his dark eyes aglow. Chapter 16. She stepped back toward the hallway. He stopped in the center of the room. The strong sunlight from the bedroom window seemed to shine right through him. His dark hair, his denim jacket, his jeans were all outlined in gold. Hey, what's happening? He asked. Melissa didn't reply. She stood, waiting to see if he'd come any closer. Why are you so scared of me all of a sudden? He asked, looking suspicious. Don't play dumb, Melissa said, her arms crossed protectively in front of her. I'm losing control, he said softly, and as he spoke, his entire body shimmered and started to fade, making the sunlight from the window seem brighter. I can't seem to control my strength. I keep fading in and out. You were solid enough in the parking lot, Melissa said angrily. Huh? The shimmering slowly stopped, and he stood solidly on the carpet once again. He scratched the side of his jaw. For the first time, Melissa realized, he looked frightened. Behind the anger and bitterness, he was just a frightened teenager. How'd you get back here so quickly? Melissa asked. The sunlight was hurting her eyes, making it hard to see him. She circled around him, keeping her distance, and sat down on the windowsill, her back to the sun. Get back. What are you talking about? Are you playing some kind of mind game on me? I left you standing outside in the parking lot. Now here you are, she said. The sun felt good on her back. He shook his head and started to pace. You've totally lost it. You've totally lost it, Melissa told him. Not me. You're not going to tell me that. I've been here all morning, he said, sort of drifting in and out. Melissa pushed herself off the windowsill and stood up. Come on, Paul. You were at the supermarket. He shook his head. No, it wasn't me. You grabbed my bag and wouldn't give it back. He moved his hand up to her desk lamp. His hand went through the lamp. I can't grab anything today, he said with real sadness. I couldn't grab your bag if I wanted to. His whole body seemed to fade, as if the effort of talking was too much for him. I don't believe you, Melissa said. You're playing some kind of trick. He didn't reply, just stared back at her, trying to read her face, trying to read her thoughts. What's he doing, Melissa asked herself. Is he pretending to be weak? He looks so sad, so frightened now. Is he just trying to throw me off guard for some reason, just trying to confuse me? I suppose it wasn't you last night, she said. He looked surprised. Last night? When I appeared here last night, you screamed at me like a nut and told me to leave you alone. No, I meant before that, Melissa said impatiently, at the dance club. Dance club, he snickered. That wasn't me either. He floated down to the carpet, seemed to sink into it, his whole body disappearing, then resurfacing on top of it. Someone who looked like me, maybe. She refused to believe him. It was you, Paul. It wasn't a look-alike. You mean you don't remember? I remember last night. I went out trying to find my old neighborhood, but I couldn't find it, couldn't remember where it was, so I came back here. You're putting me on, right? You were with your buddies, sitting on cars, drinking beers, and when I came out, you... My buddies? What buddies? I don't know their names. Frankie was one of them, and the rest I don't know. Frankie. A smile slowly crossed his face, a smile of recognition. Yeah, Frankie. Hey, I remember him. Frankie Marcuso. Yeah, he was my neighbor. Great guy. Wow, I'd forgotten all about him. Who else was there? His whole face brightened when I mentioned his friend, Melissa thought. I've been so scared of him, too scared to realize how lonely and frightened he is. I don't know, Melissa replied, her mind whirling. I don't know your friends. They were creeps. Hey, wait a minute. He floated to his feet. Don't put my buddies down. Listen, is this some kind of joke or something? Melissa asked, leaning back against the windowsill. Are you putting me on? No, no joke, he said quietly, looking away from her. Then we have to figure this out, Melissa said, supporting her chin with both hands. Don't you see? You weren't there last night and this morning, but you were there. Huh? You were in 2 places at once, Paul, right? She waited for him to think about it. He looked very confused, pacing rapidly back and forth the length of her bedroom. Yeah, I guess so. I was in 2 places at once, so what does it mean? Melissa looked down at the floor, thinking hard. The Paul at the dance club and at the parking lot had seemed so different, so much more solid, so much angrier, tougher, so much more alive. Alive. She stared at the ghost, floating so lightly, so soundlessly back and forth across the carpet, and she had an idea. Paul, I think I know. He stopped pacing. I think I know too. He stared at her angrily. This is all a trick, isn't it? Some kind of stupid trick to stall for time. No, stop. That isn't it. I should have known, he muttered to himself, turning his back on her. Paul, just listen to me. I think maybe I figured out what's happening. He didn't turn around. She decided to say it anyway. We just assumed you were a ghost from the past, she said. Huh? What do you mean? He asked without turning around. We assumed that you died some time ago. You died in the past, and you've come from the past to the present to avenge your death. Well, yeah, of course, he said, obviously confused, not understanding where her thoughts were leading. He turned around and looked at her skeptically, waiting to see what came next. Well, maybe we were wrong, Melissa said, struggling to get her idea straight in her own mind. What if you were a ghost from the future? What? You mean like some stupid science fiction movie or something? No, not that. Just think a minute. What if you haven't died yet? What if you're still alive? As she said it, it all became clearer to Melissa. She knew she was right. She had to be right. You mean? I mean, you're a ghost from the future, Paul. You haven't died yet. You've come back in time. Back to a time when you're still alive. It doesn't make any sense, he said, scowling. I told you, you've totally lost it. Just think about it, Melissa cried, too excited to get exasperated with him. The Paul I saw at the dance club last night, the Paul with all his buddies, he was still alive. And the Paul who followed me at the supermarket parking lot this morning, that Paul is still alive. Don't you see? You've come back in time from the future. In this time, now, you're still alive, Paul. You're still alive. Without thinking, she ran over to him and happily threw her arms around his shoulders. She felt nothing but cold air. Feeling foolish, she stepped back. He was looking hard at her, still thinking about what she had said. In other words, he said slowly, you haven't killed me yet. His words sent a chill down her back. She dropped on her knees onto her bed. No, she said quietly, I haven't killed you yet. That's why I had no memory of killing you. I haven't done it. But you're going to. He stared at her accusingly. You're going to. No, she cried. No, don't say that. I won't. I can't. I promise I won't. I'm dead, he said glumly. I'm dead and trapped in this limbo. And you did it. No, Melissa cried, her voice choked with horror. The thought of killing Paul, of killing anyone, was too terrifying to think about. No, please listen. Don't you see? This is a second chance, Paul. A second chance for both of us. I won't kill you. I won't. Just go away. Get away from this house and stay away. If you're not here, there's no way I could kill you. I'm already a ghost, Paul said sadly. It's the live Paul who has to stay away. Of course. Don't you see? That's why you've come back, Paul. You didn't come back to Earth to kill me and avenge your death. You came back to Earth to prevent your death. You can do it. You can stop yourself from getting killed. His smile was radiant, mixed with the sunlight streaming into the room, a clean white light, so bright Melissa had to shield her eyes with her hand. When she lowered her hand, Paul was standing in front of her. It was his turn to try to hug her. He leaned down. His arms went around her shoulders. Can you feel anything? He asked. Yes, she answered truthfully. It isn't cold. The air is warm now. I can almost feel you, Paul. Still smiling, he stepped back. I'm getting strong again. Thanks, Melissa. I didn't really do anything, she said uncomfortably. She suddenly realized, to her surprise, that she cared about him, about what happens to him. Yeah, you did. You helped figure this all out. You helped me to have a second chance, and I'm not going to blow it. I'm not. I'll help, she said, thinking about how sweet and boyish she was, once he got past the tough exterior, the bitterness in his eyes. I'll take you to him. I'll take you to the live Paul tonight. You've got to warn him. You've got to stop him from getting killed. Chapter 17. Paul's house stood in a line of gray and clapboard row houses in a run-down neighborhood west of the old village. A scrawny black cat scratched through a torn plastic garbage bag on the front stoop. A few stoops down the row, two teenage girls in jeans and black leather jackets were having a loud argument ignoring a neighbor who leaned out a ground floor window, pleading desperately for them to shut up. Melissa parked the car and locked it. She wondered if the car would be okay in this neighborhood. At first, Paul didn't recognize the house. "This isn't it," he said. "It doesn't look right." "But you said Frankie was your neighbor, right?" Melissa insisted. "Well, I looked up Frankie's address in the phone book. He lives at 36, so your house must be 34 or 38. Paul, his face as gray as the evening light, shook his head uncertainly and looked up at the dark, dirty windows of the house. "Maybe," he said finally, his voice a whisper. "Maybe." Two teenage boys wearing only jeans and t-shirts despite the coolness of the evening came running at full speed around the corner. Melissa had to leap to the side to get out of their way. They laughed and kept running without turning back. To her surprise, Paul was already halfway up the steps to number 34. "This is it," he said. "Yeah, this is my house. There's my name on the mailbox. Stare it. I can remember it now. All of a sudden, I have all these memories." He didn't seem happy about them, only overwhelmed, filled with sadness, filled with apprehension. "I'm going in," he said. "Come with me." "I can't," she called up to him. "He'll see me." He turned and looked down at her from the top of the stoop. "You're right. Okay, wait for me. Wish me luck." He tried to make it sound light, but his wavering voice revealed how worried he was. "Good luck," Melissa said, sitting down uncomfortably on a cold granite step. She watched him walk through the front door without opening it. If he succeeds, if he can communicate with a live Paul, he'll go away and I'll never see him again, she thought. To her surprise, she wasn't sure how she felt about that. The ghost Paul floated through his old living room, dark and empty. The furniture looked familiar, even though a few seconds earlier he had no recollection of any of it. He stopped to run his hand over the worn corduroy couch. Without realizing it, he cried out. It was as if he were dying all over again, losing everything, losing this house, his friends, losing his memories, everything that mattered to him. "I can't go through with this," he thought. "It's just too painful. I can't bear it." He heard a noise in the back, the sound of shoes scraping against the floor, a cough. He moved away from the old couch and headed toward the back. His bedroom was there, he suddenly remembered. He could picture it so clearly. The long, narrow room, the bunk bed against the wall, the folding chair in front of the low, white counter that served as his desk. The door to his room was open. The light was on. He hesitated a few feet from the doorway. He could feel his energy levels surge. Without any further hesitation, he slid silently through the doorway and floated into the narrow room, and saw himself. Sitting on a lower bunk, illuminated by the shadeless red table lamp on the low counter, there he was. How strange to walk into a room and find yourself. How frightening. How sad. The ghost Paul drifted closer into the center of the narrow room. The live Paul tilted a beer can up to his mouth until it was empty. Then he crushed the can in his hand and tossed it toward the small black wastebasket across the room. He was dressed identically to the ghost, his denim jacket open to reveal a yellow t-shirt underneath, his jeans faded and stained. He ran his hands back through his long black hair and stood up somewhat shakily. The ghost started to call to him, then stopped. Paul had walked to the kitchen and pulled the phone book out from the shelf under the counter. He opened it and began searching for a name, moving his fingers slowly down the columns. Then he picked up the phone, an uncertain look on his face. He pushed a number, referring back to the phone book twice as he pushed it. He leaned his elbow against the counter and waited. "Hello, is Melissa there?" The ghost moved closer, realizing that Paul was calling Melissa. "No, this is just a friend," Paul said, sounding disappointed. "My name? It doesn't matter." He hung up the receiver and kicked the counter angrily. "It doesn't matter," he repeated bitterly to himself. Paul kicked the counter again, then, looking out the window, started to button his jacket. He's going out. I better materialize now, the ghost thought. He stepped in front of Paul. "Don't be afraid." Paul finished buttoning his jacket, turned, and headed out the kitchen door. "Can you hear me?" the ghost called, following behind him. Paul quickly walked back to his room, picked up a hairbrush from the dresser top, and, tilting his head to the side, began brushing his dark hair straight back, staring at himself in the rectangular mirror above the dresser. "Turn around," the ghost yelled. "You've got to hear me. You've got to." Whistling to himself, Paul tilted his head the other way and continued to brush his hair. Desperately, the ghost stepped forward and grabbed at the hairbrush, but his hand went right through it. Paul's quick brushstrokes were interrupted. "Please, turn around. Can't you hear me?" There was no answer. Paul didn't see or hear him or even sense a presence in the room. The ghost concentrated his energy, tried harder to appear. Paul turned off the lamp and headed down the long hall, then out the front door. Would he run into Melissa on the stoop? The ghost wondered. He floated through the front wall of the house. Paul was already down the steps and jogging toward Davis Street. Melissa was nowhere to be seen. Paul entered Aldo's, a liquor store on the corner. A minute later, he came out carrying a brown paper bag. Walking jauntily, he headed out to the parking lot at the side of the store. "Hey, Kenny, Frankie, what are you bozos doing here?" His buddies, talking under the silver light of the low street lamp in front of the parking lot, interrupted their conversation and came hurrying up to him. "You got beer?" Frankie asked, grabbing at the brown paper bag. "Not for you," Paul told him, swinging the bag out of his reach. "Beer makes you drool." "So? Where's your rich girlfriend?" Kenny, a skinny guy with a serious acting problem, asked Paul. Paul flashed him a dirty look. "Who?" "That rich girl with all the hair." Frankie and Kenny both burst into high-pitched laughter and slapped each other a high five. "You been giving her what she wants?" Kenny asked, leering. Frankie made another unsuccessful grab for the beer. "I can have her any time I want," Paul bragged, tapping himself on the chest. His two friends laughed again. "Then how come she came to see me?" Frankie asked, gritting. "This morning, at the supermarket." "So that's why she was at the supermarket." Paul glared at Frankie suspiciously. "What'd she want?" "My bot, I guess." Frankie and Kenny exchanged high fives again. "Right," Paul said sarcastically. "What'd she want?" "Give me a beer and I'll tell you," Frankie said. "Me too," Kenny added quickly, reaching out his hand. "Tell me, or you'll be eating the cans," Paul said menacingly. The grins faded from their faces. It was obvious that they were afraid of him. "She came to ask me about you," Frankie admitted. "What'd she want to know?" Paul demanded. "Hey, you guys," a man's voice called from the street. "Get moving. Don't hang around here." They looked up to see a policeman's head poking out of a black and white cruiser. "We were just going, officer," Paul said politely, hiding a bag containing a six-pack behind his jacket. They piled into Kenny's old Chevy Malibu, parked at the edge of the lot. The ghost Paul followed, wondering how to reach the live Paul, how to give him a sign. But he sank deeper into despair, feeling that he was destined to fail. "Where are we going?" Paul asked, seated beside his ghost in the back seat. "We can't go anywhere. We've got no money," Frankie said. "Well, there are ways to get money," Paul said, grinning. More memories came rushing back to the silent ghost at Paul's side. Night memories, memories of fear, of the blood pumping at his temples, of scrambling through windows, of desperate dark searches, of grabbing what should have been his. "You really break into houses?" Frankie asked, turning around in the passenger seat to look at Paul. Paul nodded, swallowing a mouthful of beer. "No big deal." "All those houses on Fear Street?" Kenny asked, more than a little awe in his voice. "All those stories in the paper? They're really about you?" "I said there are ways to get money," Paul said smugly. "They're calling you the Fear Street Prowler," Kenny said. "You're famous." "I don't care about that," Paul replied quietly, staring out the window as the dark houses and trees whirred by. Paul's words jarred more memories for his ghost. Yes, how could he have forgotten? He, Paul, was the Fear Street Prowler. But now he had to stop Paul. He had to keep him away from Fear Street. But how? Everything went white. He was leaving them, leaving the car, drifting into the blank world where he spent so much of his time. Struggling to stay with his live self, the ghost faded, ceased to exist. When he returned, it was some time later. The car was parked by the side of a road. Where were they? The ghost could see a tilted street sign up ahead. Fear Street. He floated over the lawn as Paul made his way around the side of the rambling old house, keeping against a wall, tight in the shadows. He was about to break into a house. No, thought the ghost. No, I've got to stop this. These break-ins will lead to his death, to my death. But what can I do? In the dark, he saw a rake tilted against a house, a few feet from where Paul stood. I'll lift the rake, he thought. I'll swing the rake. If I can frighten him, maybe he won't break into this house. Since fading into the blank white world, he felt stronger, strong enough to lift the rake. He drifted toward it, summoned his energy, wrapped himself around the handle, and tugged. Yes, he was moving it. Finally, he thought. Finally, I can get through to Paul. He pulled the rake away from the wall, raised it in the air, and saw that he was too late. Paul had already lifted himself up to the window ledge and was slipping inside the dark house. Too late. The Fear Street Prowler was about to strike again. The ghost let the rake fall to the ground, suddenly feeling powerless and defeated. When the woman's screams shattered the silence of the night air, he didn't move. A second scream, the sound of shattering glass, and Paul came barreling out of a window, rolling as he hit the ground, on his feet in seconds, and running along the hedge toward the street. The woman's screams continued. "Help! Help me! Please, somebody, help me!" The ghost watched Paul run to the car and pull the back door open. Then, as Paul dived into the back seat, the old Malibu roared away, its lights off, the back door still open. The screaming stopped. Lights came on all over the house. The ghost didn't move. He floated there, somewhere between this world and another, his mind in turmoil, feeling so light, so invisible, so helpless, so lifeless. "Where'd you go?" the ghost asked. Melissa cried out, "You scared me!" She had just washed her hair and had a green bath towel wrapped turban style around her head. She wore a pale blue cotton bathrobe over her pajamas. "Sorry," the ghost said softly, staring out the bedroom window. "I couldn't wait for you. It was too creepy there," Melissa said apologetically. She sat down on the edge of the bed, tucking her legs beneath her. "It's where I grew up," he said bitterly. "Please don't be angry," she said. "I spent my whole life angry," the ghost said. The darkness from outside the window seemed to seep into him until he was all shadows. "Being poor can make you angry. It can make you do all kinds of things." "Are you going to start putting me down again for being rich?" she asked wearily. "No." The shadows darkened. His voice grew even softer, more distant. "I saw you that day at the mall. I saw you get angry at your friend for making fun of that girl who was poor. I know you're different." He stopped. The room was silent for a long while. "But what difference does it make?" he moaned. "What happened after I left? Could he see you? Did you talk to him?" "No," the ghost explained. "There was no way. I can't change anything. I'm going to be killed. Again." "No, I won't kill him. I won't kill you," Melissa cried. "You won't be able to help it," Paul said bitterly. "Then I'll go talk to him," Melissa said impulsively, playing with the silver pendant around her neck. "What? No, that's impossible," Paul declared, shaking his head. "No, you'll get hurt." "I'll go tell him to stay away from Fear Street. I'm not invisible. He'll listen to me." "Why should he listen to you?" "I'll reason with him." "Don't be stupid." Melissa looked hurt. "I'm not being stupid. I'm trying to help. You couldn't get through to him. So who else is there to try? Only me. Think I want to go see him? No, no way." You're doing this for me?" The ghost suddenly sounded truly moved. Melissa flushed and looked away. "Well, yes, but I'm also doing it for me. I'm just so frightened that you may be right. I'm so frightened that I can't breathe. I don't want to kill anyone. I don't want your insane story to come true. If there's anything I can do to stop that from happening, I'll do it." The ghost started to fade. Now he was just a dark wisp of smoke, a thin shadow against the bedroom wall. "Forget it. We can't change anything," he said sadly, and then vanished completely.